After the sheep shearing festival in Rio Macho, we drove north through a rather barren but still beautiful landscape. Our overnight place was without trees and wind, so what could be more obvious than finally unpacking the drone again? We thought simply filming ourselves while driving was actually a good start. But at 40% of the battery charge, the drone decided it would now fly back to the point where we slept. I panic for a moment, but then I find the button to cancel the maneuver and start the descent. Phew, we were so relieved that we made it. Since we wanted to camp in a cozy spot for a few days again, we choose a lake, Lago Vintter, as a location. This one is situated very idyllic in the middle of mountains and is surrounded by forests. Though we had to leave the first place we had headed for in a hurry because of the millions of horseflies there. But a little bit further north we found a nice spot. This pretty meadow was a bit crooked, but definitely less populated with insects, so seems to be perfect to unwind. The few days of rest did us good. But since it looked like rain, we decided to move on. Once again, we didn't want to sink into a swampy meadow that was soaked by the rain. After all, we had already experienced that in Malawi, and once is enough. We enjoyed the ride through the hilly backcountry even more so. The great weather mood naturally also contributed to the joy. The way along this pretty valley was of course a special highlight. Again and again new views and great bridges await you behind the next bend. And then, almost surprisingly, came this beautiful little pass. Somehow we hadn't even noticed that we were so high up, but the number of switchbacks and the view from up here taught us otherwise. The next destination was the Parque Nacional Alerces, where the last protected Patagonian cypress trees can be found. Unfortunately, none of the official campsites were big enough for Globi, and so we had to move on after spending one night next to the riverbed. We regretted that because the lake and the forests are really breathtakingly beautiful. The cypress stocks can only be viewed by boat. The past, the only tree that can be reached on foot, we actually thought such a short hike was a good idea, was unfortunately closed because a puma had walked by there the day before. So for once our luck has left us, but let's not complain, the drive through the park is worth a trip in itself. And we were really lucky with the weather, the sun shone splendidly from the blue sky. Since it is already late afternoon, we hurry to drive out of the park to the next village. According to the Overlander app, there should be a nice parking space right on the river. And indeed, this meadow is great, away from the road, right next to the river, and plenty of space for Globi. The next stage is not really our thing. We are approaching the tourist strongholds of El Bolson and Bariloche. We prefer nature, but sometimes you just can't get around the cities. However, we have planned a small stop in Bariloche, because here is the chocolate heartland of Argentina. Fortunately, our freezer is big enough to take a kilo or two of the sweet treat. This red light has an extremely long red face, but we are very well entertained by the street artist. And finally, after an almost endless drive through the suburbs, we can leave Bariloche behind and set off on the Seven Lakes Trail. As soon as we get closer to the hills again, the landscape changes. The bank of the river which flows alongside the road are beautifully green, and we hope to find a place to sleep there somewhere.